All right, welcome into Mississippi State Live here, the voice of college football. Andrew Miller here on a Monday evening, much later than we would typically be going on a Monday. I was about to say I've had an evening, not really, because it's not been that stressful. Dinner took longer than it was supposed to, so that delayed me. Then I got back to my place, and it's like, oh crap, it's supposed to be pouring rain. I have to take the trash out, so let me get that handled. And that was already going to be around 6 o'clock when I was supposed to be going, so let me push the show back some. I come inside from taking the trash out, and my laptop screen it's on, but all you can see is the mouse, and it's not reacting to anything, and I have no idea what's going on. And get it shut off, bring it back up, and it's the same thing. Look up the problem, and I had to go through a whole reboot with the laptop, or force a restart. And that was before I got a chance to put some of the stuff I wanted to get into, because I added a topic for the show. So yeah, that's a bunch of me rattling off why we're late today on this evening, but that's fine. 7:05 is not that bad. Obviously, we typically go at 7 o'clock on Thursdays as it is. And, now that makes me think about, Thursday night, Mississippi State baseball is going to be taking on Texas A&M, that game at 6 o'clock. Oh, that sucks. That's a crappy time for the game. I don't know what time we're going to go. We may not do a call-in show later in the week, honestly, with baseball. That might make it tough schedule-wise, because Wednesdays don't work. I don't want to go at 5 o'clock on Thursday. I also don't want to try to go during the game, unless y'all want that. We did it once before, and it kind of went iffy. So I don't know. If y'all want to go have a show later in the week during baseball, let me know. We'll try something like that, but we may have to pass on a show later in the week. But we're here tonight. And I appreciate those of you who are tuning in. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel and have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And, of course, tell all the Mississippi State fans, friends, peeps in your life about Mississippi State Live. Bring them over to Mississippi State at the Voice of College Football. Tell them to go to the channel and subscribe and check out the content, and tell them that they can catch the shows. I mean, this is basically a lie at this point. When am I ever at 6 p.m. on a Monday? And Thursdays, half the time we go to different times. But it's supposed to be Mondays at 6 and Thursdays at 7. That's when we have our live shows. The late week show being a call-in show, opportunity for you guys to come be a part of the stream and chat it up. Talk about whatever you want. We had a late call. Alex Fizel getting in there right at the end. I was doing the outro, ready to go, and then Alex called in and hey, that's great. Let's chat it up for a sec. And of course, look, if you can't catch the show live, you get the opportunity to listen after the fact on your favorite podcasting platforms. Yeah, so that's where you can catch us. I do want to take a minute to promo some stuff. So last week I did an episode talking about Kamario Taylor and his impact on the Mississippi State offense, and why it's important to get a player like that in for State and how it can be beneficial. Talking, both specifically within this offense and how it can help out, but also kind of more broadly the benefit of that in this day and age in college football, having a dual threat quarterback. And I said I had an upcoming piece on the Underdog Tribune. That article is now live a week later. I'll real quick show it to you guys. Yeah, so the return of the dual threat quarterback to Mississippi State. I thought I clicked on this. Maybe I didn't. Okay. And yeah, just it's a lot. It's over 3,700 words because I'm a psychopath. This really should have been a two-part article, which, by the way, the advertisements on the site, I've had somebody ask about that. I have nothing to do with the ads. Neither does the guy who runs the ad. It's all set to your whatever your cookies are. And it's also, the domain for the website. Just putting that out there because somebody did ask me about various ads, and they're not representative of any opinions at the Underdog Tribune. It's just, you're running a blog like this, sometimes random ads are going to pop up. But yeah, if you want to go check out that piece and read more about Kamario Taylor and the impact of having a dual threat quarterback at Mississippi State, what it's going to look like within the Levy offense, it's a lot. It's a lot to read, but I would certainly appreciate it if you guys would go give it a click, read through it, and share it around if you would like to. You don't have to, but it was a lot of fun to put together. That's kind of when I first started doing MSU coverage type stuff, was sort of in the football schematic writing side of it. I say that. Was I on Maroon Mike before I started writing for? I was on Maroon Mike before I started writing for Maroon and White Nation. But when I first got into the writing side, it was kind of getting into more schematic talk and stuff like that. That's really what I really enjoy to do. And I had to get away from that for a bit with Maroon and White Nation once I took over as a side expert, just because there was so much other stuff going on. Now at Underdog Tribune, I'm kind of back in that role of just kind of writing about the things that really interest me, and that was one of them. So that was a lot of fun to put together, and I've had some positive feedback so far. So certainly appreciate those who have checked it out. If you haven't already, go give it a look. We have a lot to talk about, and I'm 6 minutes in, having rambled about things that don't matter all that much. So let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start with Bulldog baseball. Frustrating weekend. Just another frustrating weekend for Mississippi State on the diamond. Another frustrating weekend at the Dude. They finished the year 7-8 in SEC play at home, including getting swept twice. I mean, obviously, that's a big part of that. 3 series losses in your 5 SEC series at home. Just a really frustrating weekend because you felt like you finally had the breakthrough to what this team could be. That game on Thursday night was the best game State had played all year. It's not even close. Your lineup was fantastic, top to bottom throughout the game. And obviously, you get a break there in the first inning. It's like 10 pitches in, and you've had 2 strikeouts. And then on the 10th pitch is like the ground ball. What was it, Beavis who had it to the shortstop, and he just kind of slow plays it. And you beat out the throw to first. They're able to get a couple more guys on. Then, Beans goes out and for the second straight weekend hits a grand slam in the first inning. And unlike the last Sunday against Texas, you continue to build off that. State pretty consistently had the offense clicking throughout that game. Although, meanwhile, like Tico, okay, that's what that was. Sorry, I have multiple Mississippi State tabs open, and I keep clicking on the wrong one. Tico absolutely shoving on the mound, just dominant out there for one of his best performances of the year, if not for that 2-run shot there. I guess that was the 7th inning that he was in, where I don't know. Look, you got to give your hats off to the hitter there for being able to make contact on that and drive it out of the park, because it wasn't a bad pitch. It was the pitch he wanted to throw there. But it didn't matter. And you're able to close it out with I'm sorry. I'm all over the place. Scatterbrained. Jack Bauer. My goodness. Jack Bauer comes in to finish off the game, and you're set up like, okay, you just steamrolled him, and like you're not expecting it's going to be easy in either of the next 2 games. But you feel like they're going to get one of these next 2. They're going to get a big marquee series win. Finally, any doubt about this team being able to go and beat high-level competition, you don't have to worry about that much anymore. They're peaking at the right time. It's going to be a big series win. They're going to basically lock in a host spot, and the next 2 games are just frustrating, to say the least. Friday night, you get the loss 4-5, a game where you kind of get down early, and Duke Stone pitched fine for the most part, but obviously does give up 4 runs and 4 2/3 innings pitched. And the big story is Ben Davis and the decision to bring him back out there for the 9th after you had tied the game up. I don't have as strong a feeling as a lot of people do on it, but obviously the track record has not been great. And this one, was it 1 pitch? It was 1 pitch, because otherwise he was fine. But that 1 pitch was a costly one, as Auburn's able to get the home run there in the 9th to go ahead 5-4. But I mean, look, State didn't produce the plate either. You had a lot of guys struggle in that game. Garrick Fry goes 1 for 4 for Noah Sullivan, who didn't have a great weekend. 0 for 5 for Jacob Parker. It was a really kind of, outside of a home run on the first game, really struggled overall in this one, to be completely honest. And that game Friday night, I know he had the 1 bases loaded situation where it's on a 3-0 count, and he takes the swing and pops it up, and you give him the green light. And on the one hand, it's like I get it because you feel like he's earned it with the way he's been able to perform this year. But you give that green light and he pops it up, and you're not able to you end up getting nothing out of the inning. What was it? He set up a double play. I don't remember. I don't think you got – maybe you got one run. I can't remember the exact specifics there. But that should have been – it should have been ball 4. It should have been ball 4, and instead you continue on. I think Garrett Fry had a similar situation where it just didn't work out for him there. Some of the decisions, again, on 3-1, 3-0, 3-1 counts to give him a green light just didn't pan out the way you wanted them to. And it was like you were getting guys on base pretty consistently throughout the night. It wasn't like we've seen in some of these games where State's just getting nothing going, and it's like, okay, the random home run here or there is the only thing going for them. No, they're getting guys on base, giving themselves chances. They weren't able to bring those runners in. What was the tally for this one? What was it? 10 runners left on base, I think was what the number was. Left 10 runners on base in that game. Struck out 11 times. Yeah, just wasn't a great night at the plate, and then obviously the controversy with Ben Davis there pitching in the 9th inning, and it just doesn't work out for you, and you take kind of a gut punch loss, and then you go out on Saturday and just completely lay an egg and get run ruled, 13-2 in 7 innings. Obviously McPherson gives you one great inning, kind of gets into a little bit of trouble there in the second, but then also has the freak accident, which, I mean, that sucks that you finally get the guy back, and of course he finds a way to get hurt again. Now, of course, it sounds like this one with the ankle, it's not that serious of a situation. Thank God it's not his arm. That seems fine, and he was pretty PO'd to have been pulled out of the game. He felt like he should have been able to stay out there. I also understand from O'Connor's perspective, like they need this guy at full strength. And he was, I think they said the pitch count was going to be around 40, and he was at like 34, 35 pitches at that point. But look, I mean, you had the bullpen. You felt like you had the opportunity there to get through that game, and it didn't work out overall. And again, the lineup did nothing. Ace Reese was kind of the lone positive in this game on the weekend. He had a big weekend, and even when the offense wasn't doing anything else around him, you kind of saw some big bats from him, which is good for you going forward. But just kind of laid an egg and had another just iffy performance on Friday night that spirals into an awful performance on Saturday. And it's another series loss. And it's just frustrating because like this team still is not anywhere. I don't want to say they're not anywhere close, because in reality, if you just get a couple things to come together, they're going to be right up there. They can be a contending team, but at this point in the season is when you want to really see it all coming together, what you expected of this is a team that can compete for a national championship. The roster is there. The coaching on paper is supposed to be there, and I know there's been controversy over that with some of the decisions on obviously, I mean, some of the approach that they've I talked about giving the green light on 3-0, 3-1 counts, whether or not to send a runner. And then obviously the big thing is how they've managed the pitching staff at times has just kind of been confusing. I know the shortstop situation, which obviously couldn't do anything about it this weekend with Wires getting freakily hurt. But everything on paper says this team should be fantastic, and they've just not been able to fully put that together and perform at that level. You just haven't gotten it. And every time they have faced teams of equal or better talent, which I have a hard time even saying better, because truthfully on paper, this is one of the most talented teams in the country. Sorry, my camera looked a little odd there. But they've not come close to matching that potential. And every time they get into a battle against these teams that are right up there at the same level, they fall flat. That's what it's been all year. They've mostly been fine against lesser competition, save for, I guess the Tennessee series would be the exception there. But what are the Vols coming off of? Did they take a series from Texas? Is that what happened there? No, I'm curious. I know I know they won at least one in that series. Yeah, took the series from Texas. So I guess they're getting some momentum at the right time themselves. Had a series win over Alabama also. So Tennessee's kind of figuring some things out here late in the season. That's not what anyone wants to see. But you've been able to beat up on bad teams. And that's kind of the extent of it. And the Ole Miss series, that's good going into Oxford, but the time you did it, Ole Miss was playing terrible. Now, you kind of backed it up with the Governor's Cup because Ole Miss was playing well in that stretch at that time. But they're coming off a series win over Texas A&M. They're trying to put themselves back into the hosting conversation. So it feels like you look around the SEC, it's like Arkansas is playing better right now. So like Ole Miss coming off a big series win. Arkansas coming off a big series win over Oklahoma. Tennessee coming off a series win over Texas. Auburn is just red hot, and Georgia can't be stopped. You have a lot of these other teams across the conference are peaking at the right time. I guess you could argue Georgia and Auburn have peaked. I don't want to say that. I don't want to say they can't continue to make a run, but they are in the midst of playing as well as they possibly can currently. Whereas Mississippi State's still just kind of sitting around, and it's the same team we've seen all year. And, do you still have time to get it together? Sure. You go to College Station this weekend, and then you got the SEC tournament, and then it's regional play. You can still click, and it can still get to where you want it to be, but it's hard to expect that at this point. It kind of feels like, as it stands now, this team they are what they are. And I don't like saying that for baseball because you do understand that come postseason time, things can change. It can either all come together for you and it just starts to finally comes together and clicks and you get hot at the right time. It can be that you get the right path and the right matchups that you're able to take advantage of, and then you build off the momentum of those wins and turn it into a run. It could be that you get a break somewhere along the way that sparks a run where you get lucky in a couple games. You get through a regional maybe you shouldn't have, but you build off those wins and it keeps rolling for you. We've seen kind of state in all phases. On the flip side, we've seen teams that have been dominant throughout the regular season and it not matter. Obviously they weren't fully dominant, but 2016 Mississippi State gets talked about all the time for being a team that wins the SEC. It was like 9 straight wins to close out conference play to make that happen. And then they get eliminated at home in a super because you faced a great team in Arizona that went on to play for the national championship that year. We saw back-to-back years with Tennessee and Arkansas of being the clear number 1 team in the country all throughout the season, and then they get to super regional play and couldn't get through and didn't make it to Omaha. So that stuff happens both in the positive and the negative direction. 2018 Mississippi State, they were lucky to make the postseason, and they're kind of that prime example of they got very fortunate and to be able to fight back in the way they did. They get fortunate because of a rain. If that rain delay doesn't happen, they probably don't win. And they're 2 and done in the postseason, and we don't talk about that team in the way that we do. But the rain delay happens, Elijah McNamee happens, and the rest is history. And obviously, you got a lot of young talent on that team that matured at the right time. I guess what I'm getting at is you understand there's any number of possibilities that inherently come open once you get into postseason play. And obviously you just hope you put yourself in the best position, which for Mississippi State at this point would mean, finding a way to secure a host. It's just disappointing that you almost haven't even gotten, outside of Thursday night against Auburn, you haven't really gotten a look at this team as a true national contender, which I think is the expectation that people had coming into the year. Now, there will be a lot of debates over whether or not that's fair or not. It's year 1 of Brian O'Connor. Can you put those expectations on a team? I'm not saying Omaha or bust was the mentality here. And again, I want to say I'm not writing off the season. I'm going off of what we have seen so far, and just in all likelihood, the team we've seen to this point is not a team that's going to make a deep run. They're a team that can get to a super regional, and then you're going to face a team that's pretty good. And it's going to be tough to expect whether they're in Starkville or on the road to get through that. That doesn't mean they won't. Doesn't mean they won't click at the right time. Don't old takes expose me over this. I'm talking about what we have seen through 50-plus games now at this point. It's hard to expect it from this team outside of just having faith because you want to have faith. And if that's you, hey, hats off to you. But, yeah, like they've not met that level, and again, Omaha or bust is not always a fair mentality to have because of all the random things that can happen. But I think it's more of you need to go into the postseason as a team that very clearly people are talking about as a contender, right? 2016 Mississippi State, the Arkansas and Tennessee teams in 21 and 22, everyone was talking about those teams as national championship contenders, and then just the tournament happens the way it does. That's a part of it. This team, it's kind of hard to talk about them that way. They're very clearly a rung or two below the rest. And that's where it'd be disappointing. It's like, yeah, they're a very good team, and is a path there for a deep run? Certainly. The talent's there for even more. But you want to see them hit that. And that's kind of what's frustrating to this point, is you don't feel like they've reached it. We'll see if that changes. And they get a big opportunity, Texas A&M. The Aggies have a couple series losses in a row now. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing for State. I don't know whether playing on the road is a good or a bad thing. I know that's a big debate right now. Can this team play in Starkville? But you need to go, and I think for people to feel good, you probably need a series win. I think taking another series loss, even if you don't get swept, and even if you're competitive in all three games, is one of those things that's going to be tough for people to be optimistic about moving forward. Now, the bigger debate is, how does this impact from a hosting conversation? And, I pointed out after the LSU series that I didn't know if just getting one conference win in each of your remaining series to get to 16 SEC wins, because you were 13 coming out of that series, if that would actually be enough to lock up a host. Because what I said is, like, if that's what happens, what you're saying is down the stretch, you lost all of your series the rest of the way. Or, if you got a series win, that would have meant you got swept somewhere between Texas, Auburn, and Texas A&M. And it was pointed out to me, they really aren't supposed to look at series wins. It's the overall body of work. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. But you're still saying that this is a team that down the stretch was not winning all that much against good competition, was just kind of piling up losses. Is that a team that really has the best argument to host? Now, the counter is the metrics and where Mississippi State's would be at from a metric standpoint. And if you look as it stands right now, coming off this series loss, they're number 12 in the RPI with the number 8 strength of schedule, 9-11, nice, against quad 1, 5-3 quad 2, and still undefeated in quad 3 and 4. So, you haven't taken a single bad loss. You're 500 against the top 2 quadrants, which isn't great, but it's not like it's horrific. It's not like you just can't win against any competent teams. You've got good wins on the resume, just not the number of great wins that you would like to have to kind of end any sort of discussion about where you would be. Assuming, look, if you go to Texas A&M, who's currently number 10 in the RPI, your strength of schedule is probably going to bump up another point or two because of that. And let's say you take one. You're probably still top 15 in the RPI. You would add a 10th quad 1 win with a couple more losses. So you would fall, below 500 in the top 2 quads. So, that's an interesting conversation, but still would not have a single bad loss. So you're talking about a team that would, again, the RPI would be fantastic. The strength of schedule would be fantastic. 0 bad losses. Decent number of quality wins, even if the overall record of those is not great. And a winning SEC record, which does factor in. That obviously is, I know I had a little bit of back and forth the other night on Twitter. It's hard to say there's a benchmark in any given one year because it's all relative. But if you want to talk about hitting benchmarks, that's hitting the benchmarks. And for Mississippi State's sake, I would say that their biggest flaw being they've just lost to other host teams is not nearly as significant as some of the other flaws out there with the teams that, man, their metrics suck, or their strength of schedule is iffy, or crap, they've lost some series to some bad teams. The teams that are all kind of over the place from a profile standpoint. Mississippi State's is very straightforward. It's like, hey, this is the resume of a team that we could easily say should host. It's just a matter of whether or not the committee is still going to value that when you have other teams, talk about Ole Miss trying to make a run. It's hard to put Ole Miss ahead of State when State is 4-0 against the Rebels. I don't think the Rebels should jump Mississippi State. But if Ole Miss gets a series win over, I think it's Alabama to close out, I mean, they also don't have a bad loss. They've got more quad 1 wins than Mississippi State. I think they would finish with a better quad 1-2 record at that point. They would jump State in the strength of schedule. This is assuming State loses the series to A&M. And they would have they would jump State in the RPI, and they would have a better strength of schedule. Mississippi State beat Ole Miss 4-0. That counts for something. But if you wanted to make an argument for season long of the Rebels ahead, I'm not saying that should happen. I'm saying the committee could do it. Arkansas is a hot team right now, and they did take the series from Mississippi State. And there's some talk about the Hogs getting back in the hosting conversation. Now, meanwhile, there's teams like Kansas and Coastal Carolina where it's like, okay, should those teams even really be host at this point? There's kind of some rise and fall around Mississippi State. It could be to Mississippi State's benefit here of, hey, your profile is very straightforward. We can easily say that's a host team, and we're just going to say that's a host team and leave it at that and not have a bunch of debate, argument one way or another. Versus, okay, well, what matters more? These teams that have the weird RPI, but these teams that have a bunch of bad losses. States is very straightforward. It could be an easy selection. I just think if you don't get another series win, and I'm not, by the way, people keep bringing up the Governor's Cup. I understand that matters from a quality win standpoint. It's another conference win. I get it. But if we look at this and State closed out the regular season really poor and then doesn't do anything in Hoover, I don't know. I feel like you've opened the door that if the committee wanted to make an example is not the right word, but if the committee wanted to argue a different way and go with somebody else, which sometimes they do, maybe they could do it. I was trying to see if D1 had updated their regionals. I don't think they have. I was hoping to see what a projection would look like right here, right now. Yeah, nothing just yet. Okay. I guess that'll be tomorrow that they put that out, would be my guess. I wanted to see where they had Mississippi State at coming out of this weekend. I would fully expect they would have State projected as a host. Everything about State's profile right now says that as a host team. All I'm getting at is I do think it could be closer than maybe some fans would like to admit if they only take one in College Station. I still think they would be more likely to host than not. I would still project them to host. But if you want to feel good, I think you need to go take that series. And if you go take the series from A&M, I know a lot of people say, well, at that point, you should be a top 8 national seed. I don't know if they would get there or not. But I think taking the series from A&M, it removes all doubt that you are firmly going to be hosting. And it would also just be great to have some momentum going to the postseason and beating a team that's very good. I know A&M's coming off back-to-back series losses, and I guess in this case, they would be faltering even more if you took a series. But you need some positive momentum going to the postseason. So there's still a lot for this team to get figured out. They need to get it figured out. But, they still have plenty to play for. I don't want to just write them off as being, done and there's no chance they're accomplishing what anybody wants them to. If it all comes together, this can be the season it was supposed to be. That's all still on the table. But they've got to get some things figured out going to this final weekend. So a big test coming up against Texas A&M. Let's move over to some football recruiting talk. Because we're getting into the summer months now, and summer tends to obviously be a big time for Mississippi State football recruiting because you get, I guess it's the top dog camp or the big dog camp, whatever they want to call it, on campus. Typically try to turn that into a big commitment party type thing where you'll get several guys to commit at once. And State has obviously done a great job historically over the summer of getting guys into the class. And, it's been hit or miss at times whether or not they hold on to those guys, but June especially tends to be really big for Mississippi State from a recruiting standpoint, and it needs to be this year. Let's talk about the class here and who Mississippi State's got committed as it stands right now. Let me share my screen. Yeah, there we go. All right, so right now, only 7 commitments in the class for Mississippi State. Number 34 in the country nationally, according to 247 Sports. Headlining Christian Alexander at running back, 4-star out of Tunica. There's a couple, big-time running backs in the state, and you would expect State to be able to get one of them. Christian Alexander is one of those guys. 5'8", 195, so a little bit on the smaller side. But you've seen State take a few of those guys. They like the kind of the more explosive back types, and that's what you're getting there. You signed 2 outstanding backs last year. You're going to lose Fluff Bothwell after this year, I would imagine, based on some of the early projections. But running back is not an area where I think you need to take a ton. But State could. I think there's another running back in the class State might look to get. But at the very least, if you're going to have one guy and 4-star top 10 player within the state of Mississippi, great pickup. Caleb Unger out of Madison, out of MRA. Interior offensive line prospect, 6'2", 300, 89 overall player, top 15 prospect in the state. This is a good pickup for MSU, and we'll talk about it here in a bit. That offensive line is one of those spots where it's really important that they do well this year in terms of their commitments. And Unger, if you read up the profile on him, literally the only thing that's preventing him from being a firm 4-star player across the board is just the size. 6'2", 300, you would ideally like to have a bigger frame. But everything, you read the breakdown that's on 247, projects as a guy that'd be a multi-year start at the power conference level. He's got some good offers. That's a good pickup for State. And again, O-line's a spot that's going to be really important. Javarius Griffin, a wide receiver out of Cleveland, 88 overall, 6 foot, 185, speed guy. It fits the profile of what Mississippi State is looking for of the receivers, explosive play potential. That was a really good pickup for them. Sutton Gutting out of Riverdale High School up in Tennessee, tight end, 6'5", 225, big frame, 88 overall, 3-star. Very much a inline blocking type is what you would expect there. And kind of how you would expect him to help the class. I don't think tight end is going to be an area that State hits heavily this year because you committed 3 last season, and every single guy you got on the roster can come back in 2027. But getting another kind of physical guy in the class, especially after last year, bringing in Zayon Cotton. I believe Adam Land, we've talked about, has some receiving ability to him as well. Getting that guy who's more of a physical type to have in there is certainly a good pickup. Brandon Allen Jr. is going to be a name to watch for State out of Atlanta, corner, 6'2", 175, 87 overall. Really rangy player. Big-time tackler, if you go and watch. He's a guy that's going to fly downhill and make plays. So a physical player at corner with obviously the length and the speed to be that guy on the outside. There's been a lot of talk of other programs getting involved here. Virginia Tech, South Carolina, I believe Florida State, Auburn. Several different programs have come up for Brandon Allen as him showing a lot of interest. This is going to be one to watch for State. And how well are they able to hold on to him? If they can hold on to him, it's a great addition because again, it's a big frame, really talented player. Could easily end up being a 4-star when it's all said and done. You want to keep him in the class for sure, but it's going to be a battle. Hudson Fuqua out of Murfreesboro, another guy out of Riverdale. You got 2 guys from Riverdale, and then also I think they're recruiting a quarterback from Riverdale for next year for the 2028 class. 5'11", 180 safety, 87 overall. Just a guy that can very clearly understands where he's supposed to be on the field. Just sort of always going to get his nose to the football. Really good play recognition, which is what you're looking for from the safety spot. Purdue kind of heavily involved there, but MSU has held that commitment. And then Tricarian Collins is another safety, 85 overall out of Ridgeland, 6'2", 175. The offer list for him, Arkansas, Ole Miss, but Alabama mixed in there as well. This feels like a guy where the rating would probably be higher. It probably will be higher as it goes along. And this is someone that State recently got that commitment back in April. And you read up the scouting report, really high on him with the size and the athleticism and has a chance to really shoot up the recruiting ranks. So this, for a guy that State's got on board here pretty early, could end up being one of those gems in the class that State was able to get that commitment early on in the process. So you've got a good group committed thus far, but obviously it's just not the numbers. Only 7 commitments as it stands presently for Mississippi State. But the guys you've got in the class, it's a good group. And all guys that project as power conference players for sure. You're not talking about – we talked about last year Mississippi State. It felt like a ton of their early commitments were guys that you look at their offer sheet and it's like, man, Mississippi State is the only big-time offer this player has. It's like, why are you going after these players? This year, you don't have a ton of the numbers just yet. And again, you expect that to bulk up in the coming months. These are all guys that are good players that you have other programs very interested in at the Power Conference and also at the SEC level. So State's off to a pretty solid start. And like I mentioned, you got a couple guys in there that, that may be 3 stars, but really the talent level is higher. In terms of what's going to matter in this year's class and what State's going to be after, offensive line, I mentioned it. I think it's going to be really big for them this year. Purely from the standpoint of, like, you've got to get some young, homegrown talent that you can build around. When you look at State and the offensive line classes from the past couple of years, I would say the past 2 years, you've gotten some guys in there that you feel have the opportunity to grow and develop. But when we looked at State's portal class this year for offensive line, one of the things that I talked about was, you notice they're taking a lot of young guys, taking a lot of guys that State would have loved to have had out of high school but ended up going elsewhere. And it felt like the reason State took this approach of, we're not just going after offensive linemen who we expect to play this season, was because they felt they needed offensive linemen that they could get into the program and develop over multiple years to become starters down the line. Because they felt like the young offensive linemen they had on the roster were not guys that project to do that. So the reason you go get Mario Nash and LJ Perdome and Tyler Miller is because those are guys that can continue to develop, and you would expect down the line that can be a big-time player within the SEC versus some of the guys that were recruited before we got here, or some of the guys we recruited and signed ourselves. It's just not going to cut. They're not going to cut it. You got to change that. You've got to start getting those guys in the program early. And I know it's tough with offensive line in the portal era because a lot of those guys don't want to stay. And also, look, frankly, the coaches, I've said this too, the coaches are guilty of, cutting that weight early with O-line and not letting that play out because they want to go and get the contributors. But State's got to figure out offensive line more. And, fortunately for them, I do think there's a lot of talented offensive linemen in the state. Now, as we'll get to here in a bit, they're not really in the running for some of the top guys. But they've got a couple really nice offensive linemen that they are competing for. I mean, one of those is Unger and having his commitment, but you have another guy who's now an out-of-state player that they're going to be pushing for as well, who could be a really, really nice commitment for them. Defensive line for the same reason, but also because of bodies. I think you're going to have 5 defensive linemen at least graduating from the program next year. A lot of guys from the starting line, or a lot of guys from the 2 deep, they're going to be moving on after next season of the defensive line. You've got to get some young talent in there. And that's another one of those problems for Mississippi State is the young defensive line talent is not what it needs to be. Now, this year's class ended up being positive. The reports I've heard from the guys State signed this year on the defensive line, it's one of the better groups they've brought in a long time. You got to stack that, though. It can't be that you only get one of those guys in the class. You got one guy who projects as a power conference player maybe in a few years, but then the other guys are just sort of developmental. We'll see what happens. You need to go out and win some battles for some really talented defensive linemen. The thing that used to never be a question for Mississippi State, getting the big-time defensive linemen, they've failed to do that. That's got to change this year. And it can't just be all those guys go to Ole Miss, which has been the problem recently. There's big-time defensive line talent in the state. There always is, but this year specifically, there's some really good defensive linemen. You got to get a couple of those guys on board. I think safety is going to be important, and they've already got a couple of good safeties committed because they're losing a lot of safeties after this year. Linebacker is another arguable one because you didn't take any high school linebackers last year, and you look at the next year, like you're not losing anybody after this season. Well, I mean, Zachary Tillman will be gone, and I guess you never know if anybody's going to make a move for whatever reason. But everybody else has the ability to come back. Then you're going to be seeing a lot of guys move on. Assuming that everybody stuck around, Jalen Smith, Darian Gillette would both be done. There's somebody that I'm forgetting who would be a senior at that point. Also, I mean, hey, let's say Tyler Lockhart doesn't kill it for the next 2 years, and then he's done. You obviously hope to have him 4 years, but if he's gone after 3 years, that means he was awesome. I think linebacker's a spot might be interesting for State to watch in this class and how they choose to go about that. So real quick, just to kind of talk about some of the guys in the class this year in 2027 that you're going to be making a push for and some of their big targets. And let me actually go to the top players in the state of Mississippi. Let me pull that up. So if you go to the top 10, Mitchell Turner, 4-star defensive lineman out of Louisville, 94 overall, top player in the state. Projected for Alabama as it stands right now, but Mississippi State's been pushing, and Mississippi State seems to have an opportunity here. That would be massive, man. If you could find a way to get the number one player in the state, it'd be absolutely huge, especially at a position like that. Now, Caden Moss, and I'll go ahead and hit Caden Moss and Antonio Berry, a pair of 4-star offensive linemen here in the state. Neither of them are committed. Both of them have already released kind of top 4, top 5, with Mississippi State not included. So that's where I mentioned in-state linemen. Unger is a good pickup, and then there's some other guys down the board who look like some good additions potentially. But then there's also one out-of-state kid, as I'll get to. But the top 2 linemen of the state, State feels like they've kind of missed the boat there. So unless you can find a way to get back into it, you're not going to get one of those top offensive linemen in Mississippi this season. Majarvis Shoemaker, another defensive lineman out of Ackerman, 92 overall, 4-star. Ole Miss commit, but Mississippi State's getting them on campus. So you want to make a push there. Sam Lejeune out of Poplarville, 4-star. This one's really important for Mississippi State. And unfortunately, it feels like there's a lot of other programs, Florida State especially, that are really in the running there, and that State's maybe not where you would like them to be. But that's a guy that for MSU, you want to make a push for and want to be able to get one of those guys. You have, total this year. That should, 3 of the top 4 players in the state are defensive linemen. And actually, if you go out to the top 5 and you include Derwin Fields at edge, who's a Texas commit that Mississippi State's not going to be able to get in the game for. But yeah, 3 of the top 4 players in the state of Mississippi are really talented defensive linemen. If you're Mississippi State, you got to get one of those guys. Ideally, you'd love to get 2, but you need to get one of those guys to commit. That's a big thing that's got to be able to happen. Continuing down the board, Frederick Ford at linebacker, 4-star out of Greenwood. I don't know if he's released let me see real quick if he's put out a top 4, if anything has happened there. But Mississippi State is in the game there, and he's got a visit coming up later this month. I mentioned linebacker is one of those spots where you would like to potentially add some guys. That's one of those guys to watch. Running back Ty Keys out of Poplarville, already committed to Miami. Then you got Christian Alexander. Tyson Robinson out of Brandon. That's another running back that I think Mississippi State's showing some interest in. And those are all your 4-stars. Now, look, there's still some other good players in the state. Dolph McDonald at corner out of Morton, someone that Mississippi State's very interested in. Devontre Brewer at linebacker. Mississippi State feels like is projected right now. There's a crystal ball in for Mississippi State to be able to land him. Sheldon Isaac at receiver out of Macomb. The expectations for Mississippi State to be able to get that, make that happen. DJ Dotson as an offensive lineman out of Oak Grove is someone that Mississippi State's kind of in the mix for. There's still good players down the board for Mississippi State, including at some positions of need. But again, offensive line, defensive line are those 2 spots that I talk about heavily where I really feel like you need to be able to make something happen. Now, I mentioned out-of-state offensive lineman, sort of the one you're really pushing for. LaMarcus Jones, 6'5", 285 tackle from Brentwood. He's from Mississippi. He's going to be playing at Brentwood Academy next year. So he's made the move up to Tennessee. 90 overall, 4-star. Mississippi State's in a good spot with that recruitment. That's one they really need to try to make happen. If you can get him and Unger in the class as your 2 main offensive linemen, and then you bring in one more guy that's just a good player that maybe you can develop a little bit, that'd be a really good offensive line class for State. But that's one for sure with LaMarcus Jones. So that's really the big thing for me. Like LaMarcus Jones, one of the top defensive linemen, if you get those guys and then can add a few other pieces around them, you start to feel pretty good about this being a big class. It could also be a case for Mississippi State, kind of like we saw this last year, where the momentum has to come as you get closer to signing day. I talked about earlier last year at this time, you looked at the commitment list for Mississippi State. No offense to any of those players, it was pathetic. You had a lot of guys committed in the class that were not projected as power conference players. But State just had to have guys committed. Once the season went along and State started to show like, hey, this program is moving in the right direction. Also, State started to get some things taken care of from an NIL standpoint, frankly. You were able to get some guys in the class and get some really big wins down the stretch. Obviously, none more notable than Braylon Womack and then Micah Nickerson. Getting those two guys in the class was absolutely massive. State could still do a ton of work in the fall and in the weeks leading up to signing day. You know, we've seen that now. But you would love to be able to get that momentum created a little bit earlier. So pivotal few weeks for Mississippi State, pivotal next couple months really for MSU on the recruiting trail. They're off to a solid start with the class, but you got a couple spots you definitely have to address and get a little bit better at down the stretch. Let's close out. Talk a little women's basketball recruiting. We'll go portal. We haven't done a ton with the women's team. I hit some of the commitments that they've gotten already, and we'll run through them again here. But today, USA Today put out their top portal classes for women's basketball. Mississippi State checking in at number 11 nationally. And we kind of saw early, Sam Purcell was doing some nice work in the portal because he had a lot of work to do. They were lost most of the team from a season ago. Madison Francis and Favor Nwodozie in your front court, outstanding returning duo. A couple young players that are the focal points of your team. It's going to give State one of the better front courts in the SEC with those two kind of to build around. But you basically your entire backcourt gone. You really needed more depth in the front court beyond those two. Was going to have to do a lot of work, and you've done that. And again, now you got the number 11 class. So running through, and the first three here are all players we've already talked about. Macy Pfeiffer, 6'1" guard out of Middle Tennessee, Mississippi native, 11.4 points a game, 5.8 boards, 1.4 assists, 43% shooter, and 35% from three. She was a Conference USA honorable mention in all freshman team in terms of her honors on the season. So really talented piece there in the backcourt. Also can give at 6'1", could probably play at the wing for you with a little bit more range there. And about 6 rebounds a game. So I would probably expect her to be your starter at the three. Reese Beatty, 5'8" guard from Iowa State. She came off the bench last year for a really good Cyclones team. 4.6 points, 2.6 boards, but 3.3 assists and 38% shooting. So not getting much from an offensive standpoint, but the 3.3 assist as a backup, again, coming off the bench. Someone that you would expect, okay, that probably plays your point guard role this season. Callie Smallwood, 5'9" guard from UAB. That's Laney Smallwood's older sister. Big-time three-point shooter. 42% from three, taking about 7 attempts per game last season for the Blazers. Averaged 14 points, about 4 rebounds, and overall 46% from the floor. But again, 42% from three, when you're shooting 7 a game, you're going to take that all day. And that's going to be something this team needs for sure, is you got to have a couple of those knockdown shooters. Pfeiffer's pretty good from three, but Smallwood is that player that you would look at as like, all right, that's the piece in the lineup who is giving you that 3-point production primarily. Next three, 2 of them are JUCO transfers, but you got another one from the D1 ranks. Eris McToon, a 5'11" guard out of LaSalle, 15 points a game, 7.6 rebounds, 2 assists, 3.2 steals, and shot 40% from the floor. Not a good 3-point shooter, but this is the A10 defensive player of the year last season. So adding that big-time defense to your backcourt. And obviously, look, 15 points and 7.6 boards can definitely score it as well, and can be, the physicality with the rebounding, but getting some big-time defense is a big help for this team. You got a pretty good rounded backcourt just with those transfers. And then you add another talented piece of the JUCO ranks, Tootie Lockett, a 5'9" guard from Itawamba Community College. She's out of Starkville, from Starkville High. 14 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, shot 44% from the floor, only 27% from three. But was a JUCO All-American last year. So that's another piece there in that backcourt who can give you some help there and kind of compete for that at that point guard spot. And then your one addition in the front court that you've made, because you brought two players back there, but otherwise your backcourt completely gone. Ariana Francisco de Oliveira, a JUCO transfer, 6'4" forward from Gulf Coast State in Florida, originally from Brazil. Last year, 19 points, 9 rebounds, shot 46%. It was 32% from three, which you'll take, plus 30% shooting from a big all day. Was very good at the free throw line, better than 80%. Again, you'll take that from a big. You know, the players that get fouled, good free throw shooter is great. It was an all-conference player, the JUCO ranks. This is a good class coming in for State, for sure. There's a lot of talent there. You've built a really well-rounded front court to complement what you got in the back court. Built a well-rounded back court with a lot of good scoring options, but also some players who could be those distributors type, the player that could be the knockdown three-point shooter, the girls rather, that can play great defense, rebounding at a couple of those spots. A lot of depth there in the back court now to complement what you got in the front court. And then obviously Ariana Francisco kind of giving you a little bit more depth there. And you got a couple good freshmen coming in. I mentioned Laney Smallwood. That's a 4-star consensus top 100 player nationally at guard. Plus another from 247, a 4-star top 100 player in Andrea Flores at guard. So the backcourt talent is going to be legit with this team. Your top 2 in the front court are fantastic. They probably need to get another big from a depth standpoint. I can make an argument for signing a couple here. I don't know who you're going to get from the portal moving forward, but you'd like to get a couple more bodies there just to have in the rotation. And then obviously, God forbid there's an injury, you need to have some players you can lean on. But Purcell's put together a good group. This is going to be, I think, a really talented roster. I'm not going to sit here and say it's as talented as roster he's had, because obviously his first couple of years, he put together some really good teams overall. But this is a good group for him. And look, the expectation has got to be NCAA tournament. It's kind of been 1 year on, 1 year off now for Purcell, despite every single year having a roster that on paper should be in the tournament. I think that's the case again. I would say this should be a tournament team next season. I would love to say you can ascend within the SEC. I'm not going to pretend that I know the opposing rosters in the SEC in women's basketball and what the makeup looks like. I don't know what it is on the men's side right now. But I can look at Mississippi State and say, yeah, that's a really talented group. And with what you have coming back, with the players you've added this year, this should be a good group for Sam Purcell. So, he needs to win. There's a lot of pressure on both Bulldog basketball coaches this year to take big step forwards. Not as big a step for Purcell because they were at least in postseason contention until the last couple weeks of the season. But you'd kind of like to see them, not be a team that's on the bubble for much of the year when they've kind of been in that spot. And obviously on the men's side, there's a lot more that has to happen for them. But good group for Purcell, and I think that's a team that you could be excited about next year. A lot of talent. That's going to do it for me this evening. I will try to figure out what's the plan for later in the week. Obviously, with baseball playing a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, and the first game happening at 6 o'clock. I could look. What is the Friday game for Mississippi State against Texas A&M? Another 6 p.m. first pitch. And I don't want to go earlier than that. I don't want to do like a 5 o'clock show. That's just a tough time for me to make. We'll figure it out. Either we'll just go live during the game, and we'll just chat it up and kind of have a little bit of a watch along, or we'll put it off till next week. But, I'll try to figure out that for sure. Appreciate everyone who was here. Always fun checking in and sticking with me later than we typically do on a Monday night. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. Oh, real quick, do need to tell you guys, I'm forgetting things. I have responsibilities of stuff I got to be able to tell you guys real quick. Let me show you. We got some great merch at the Voice of College Football store. A lot of teams represented if you want to get some team-specific gear. No Mississippi State just yet on the board, but we're hoping we can get there at some point. But a lot of SEC teams. So if you know a fan of another team in your life, Auburn, why give them 4 trays of food when you can give them Voice of College Football gear for Auburn outfielders? I know that's what everybody really wants. But, yeah, great hats, those T-shirts, that heavyweight tee with the maroon color on it. We got some drinkware that we have available. So a lot of great gear with the Voice of College Football. So go check out the Voice of College Football shop. But, yeah, thanks to everybody for listening. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. As always, swing your sword. Hail State.